August 10th, 1994. I have taken up this journal again, reluctantly, and only because certain patterns suggest the coming year will not permit the luxury of reflection once it begins. I do not keep this record for sentiment, nor for posterity. It is merely a discipline, a containment method, a private ledger in which to track the slow shifts of the world and the still quicker betrayals of my own thoughts. Already there are signs that the months ahead will demand vigilance, whispers at the edge of wizarding society. Disturbances masked as coincidence, a rising tension in the air, thin, metallic, familiar in a way I would prefer to forget. Even my sleep has taken on the quality of a corridor walked too often. Cold stones, distant echoes, something approaching from behind. If previous years have taught me anything, it is that quiet summers are deceit. Hogwarts is never calm for long, and those who occupy its halls, especially certain students, have an uncanny talent for becoming the gravitational center of calamity. I record these thoughts here, not for comfort, but for precision. Words clarify. Patterns emerge more easily when they are set upon a page. And should events unfold as I suspect, slowly at first, then with sharp acceleration, I will require a place to measure their progression. The school year lies just beyond the horizon. Foreign visitors, unwelcome reunions, cold magic stirring where it ought not, and Potter, always Potter, returning to these halls with the same unstoppable force that drags storms inland. I can feel it already, the shape of the year tightening, coiling, preparing to reveal itself. If trouble is coming, and it is, then this record will serve as the only witness I trust. August 17th, 1994. The aftermath of the Quidditch World Cup has rippled through the wizarding world with all the grace of a ruptured cauldron. Even here, far from the trampled campsites and the Ministry's frantic blundering, the air clings with the residue of panic. Children wrote home in a frenzy. Parents returned owls laced with hysteria. And the prophet, predictably, spewed half-truths smothered in sentimentality. None of it surprises me. The public has always been exquisitely talented at missing the point. What lingers with far more weight is the return of the mark to the sky. I cannot banish that image. Green fire unveiling the serpent-shaped truth everyone pretends is dead. My own mark stirred that night, a faint pool beneath the skin, as though an old scar had remembered itself. It was not pain, merely recognition, an echo, but echoes are rarely harmless. Dumbledore has offered me little more than a measured nod and the suggestion that these things must be watched. He never says what he already knows. The man wields silence with the precision of a blade. I am left to infer, to calculate, to rebuild the shape of his meaning from the gaps he leaves. It is an exhausting exercise, one I have mastered through necessity rather than desire. The castle stands empty still, its stones holding the last of summer's heat, though a draught moves through the lower corridors like a premonition. I have restocked my stores, catalogued the damage left by last year's dunderheads, and filled the dungeon with the familiar scent of dried lovage and powdered root. Routine is a fragile anchor, but it is an anchor nonetheless. Yet the world is shifting. Something old is stirring beneath the surface of things, like the first tremor before a storm. The dark mark over the cup was not the gesture of a fool with nothing better to do. It was a message, one sent to those who can still read it, and I have read it. I have no choice but to read it. August 29th, 1994. The castle grows restless as September approaches. Even without students, Hogwarts has its own pulse. Subtle shifts in staircases, the groan of beams settling, wards stretching like muscles waking from slumber. I have spent the past days preparing my classroom, a task as thankless as it is necessary. Shelves have been reinforced. Unstable ingredients have been coaxed back into obedience. The despised first-year cauldrons, thin tin mockeries, have been replaced where rust threatened to compromise them. I expect they will be destroyed by mid-October regardless. What refuses to be restored to order, however, is the world outside these walls. The Ministry attempts to smother the truth of the cup beneath memoranda and public relations campaigns as though bureaucracy can cauterize fear. Fudge has grown defensive, brittle, an overeager clerk playing minister. He parades auras through London and calls it reassurance. He should be looking for patterns for the currents beneath the chaos. But of course he will not. His imagination stretches no further than his own comfort. My own mark has remained quiet since the cup, but there is a residual ache low beneath the skin, like a warning that has not yet chosen its moment. Karkaroff has already sent word through indirect channels, mealy-mouthed inquiries disguised as pleasantries. He is afraid. He always was. I can almost hear the faint scuttling of his conscience, desperate to find some crack in which to hide. There is nothing more nauseating than a coward who once fancied himself powerful. Dumbledore, meanwhile, moves about the castle with that disconcerting calm that suggests he is already 3 steps ahead of everyone else. When I attempted to raise the matter of the mark, he offered only a contemplative silence, as though listening to music only he can hear. It is infuriating and troubling. His stillness is rarely stillness. The sky broke into storms this afternoon, lightning crawling over the lake like veins of quicksilver. The air tasted charged, metallic, almost sentient. I could not shake the sense that the weather itself is anticipating something. Perhaps it is only my own mind drawing patterns where none exist. But I have learned not to ignore the prickling at the edge of perception. A new term approaches, weighed with more than lesson plans and adolescent foolishness. There is a structural imbalance in the world, a tilt just sharp enough to feel beneath one's feet. Whatever was set in motion at the cup has not finished with us. The castle knows it, the wind knows it, and so do I. September 3rd, 1994. The first trickle of students arrived today, early over Agar, and already noisy. Their chatter poured through the entrance hall like water seeping under a door, impossible to block and just as irritating. Even before the full body of the school descends tomorrow, the castle feels abruptly cluttered, its air thickened by luggage, owls, and the particular scent of adolescent anxiety that clings to young wizards like static. I supervised the restocking of the hospital wing's supply cabinet this morning, ensuring Madame Pomfrey received her annual allotment of antidotes and restorative draughts. She fussed, as she always does, but at least she is competent. I cannot say the same for half the ministry officials still loitering about the grounds, inspecting security protocols in a vain attempt to appear responsive after the cup. Their presence irritates the castle. Wards twitch under their touch, archways tighten, the magic itself recoiling as if offended by their incompetence. Parents have begun sending owls ahead of their children, letters freighted with anxiety about recent events. They dance around the subject, some too frightened to name the dark mark, others too politically cautious to admit they even saw it. Predictable cowardice. The truth is that most of them want reassurance, and they would prefer it delivered in simple language by someone they already distrust. I will not oblige them. There is a tension among the staff, quiet but unmistakable. Minerva is sharper than usual, her voice clipped, her gaze lingering too long on Dumbledore whenever he speaks. Hagrid, by contrast, has been avoiding the Great Hall entirely, skulking around the grounds with the kind of guilty secrecy that suggests Dumbledore is entrusting him with work he has not shared with the rest of us. Typical secrets nesting within secret. Dumbledore himself has been preoccupied, not agitated, not fearful, merely absorbed, as though calculating a pattern whose edges the rest of us cannot yet see. When he spoke with me this afternoon, his questions were precise but strangely spaced, as though he were listening to something beneath my words. I dislike being studied, but I disliked being kept in the dark even more. My own instincts have not settled since the cup. There is a thin distortion to the atmosphere, fleeting pulses of old magic, like ripples crossing still water long after the stone has been thrown. Something is moving beyond the boundaries of what we can see, and no amount of ministry theatrics will contain it. Tomorrow, the full tide of students will arrive, bringing with them their trivial dramas and insufferable noise. But beneath the surface of the school year, a deeper current is pulling. I feel it each time the mark stirs, not yet burning, but aware, watching. And it is only September. September 28th, 1994. The castle has settled into its termly rhythm, though this year the rhythm feels misaligned. As though a note in the foundation stones is resonating off-key. I sensed it even before Dumbledore assembled the Great Hall to make his grand announcement. A whisper of anticipation woven through the torches, an unnatural hush in the rafters. Hogwarts itself knew something was coming. The Triwizard Tournament. A spectacle disguised as tradition, a parade of danger presented as diplomacy. The moment Dumbledore uttered the words, the students erupted into breathless excitement. That peculiar combination of thrill and idiocy to which adolescents are so susceptible. I watched their faces tilt upward, glowing with naive delight, each imagining themselves heroic. They haven't the faintest idea what such magic demands, or what it costs. It is a foolish undertaking to invite foreign schools into our halls at a time when the world beyond is fraying, is reckless. Durmstrang is already a liability. Where Karkaroff goes, unresolved debts follow. His presence alone irritates the air like a poorly brewed tincture. I caught sight of him in the entrance hall earlier today, prowling around the armor displays, his eyes darting to shadows that were not moving. He grows more skittish every year. Guilt has a long half-life. Beauxbatons presents a more polished facade, but I trust elegance even less than desperation. Cloaking strategy in silk is an old tactic. Their headmistress carries herself with a sort of poised restraint that suggests hidden calculation. Let the students swoon over her carriage and her plate-sized horses. I will not be distracted. The Goblet of Fire itself has already been installed, an ancient artifact humming with enchantments older than most wizarding lineages. Even from a distance, its aura prickles across the skin like static. I dislike its presence. Too many variables. Too many opportunities for clever hands to meddle. Dumbledore assures us the age restriction spells are comprehensive. But even comprehensive protections can be subverted by those with enough will and knowledge. And someone out there has demonstrated both. The staff's unease is palpable. Minerva wears disapproval like a starched collar. Flitwick grows fretful whenever the subject turns to safety protocols. And Poppy has already threatened to resign should she be required to patch together mutilated champions. Dumbledore listens to us all with maddening serenity, his eyes alight with that unfathomable mixture of hope and strategy. He sees possibility where the rest of us see risk. As for me, I foresee disruption, danger, and an unnecessary burden placed upon a school already straining under the weight of unspoken threats. The students sense the grandeur, but not the shadow that trails behind it. They will learn soon enough. The wind tonight rattles against the window panes like impatient fingers. The goblet burns below, its blue-white flames flickering in unnatural stillness as though holding its breath. Something is being invited into this castle, and I am not convinced we will like what answers. October 4th, 1994. DeFore and delegations arrived today with all the subtlety of a theatrical production. Beauxbatons swept in under a cloudless sky, their carriage gleaming like an ornament designed to impress small minds. Students poured into the courtyard in droves, whispering and elbowing one another as the horses descended. Massive creatures with wings beating the air in showy, glittering strokes. The display was excessive, but then so is their headmistress's penchant for grandeur. She carries herself as if the world is an audience obliged to applaud. Durmstrang's arrival felt markedly different. Their ship broke the lake's surface in a slow, dark heave, water cascading down its sides like a shroud. It was not theatrical. It was intrusive, as if something heavy had been dragged up from the depths. And then, of course, Karkaroff emerged, pale, gaunt, his gait too cautious for a man pretending authority. His eyes skimmed the crowd, never still, never trusting the shadows around him. He has always been a man at war with his own conscience, though I suspect he lost that war years ago. His gaze brushed mine. He paled. Good. The student, oblivious to subtleties, reacted precisely as expected, swooning over Beauxbatons' refined elegance, gaping at Durmstrang's stern discipline, and speculating wildly about the tournament's tasks. Their fantasies of glory will be dismantled soon enough. The goblet will not choose them for their dreams. I observed the visitors at dinner from my place at the staff table. Karkaroff simpered at Dumbledore with oily enthusiasm, the sort of obsequiousness that makes one long for silence. Beside him, his students sat, rigid and silent, their discipline almost unnerving. Crumb, whatever his name is, seemed half asleep, though perhaps it is the strain of endless adoration from half the school. The Beauxbatons lot fluttered their hands and sighed dramatically every time they were addressed, their delicate affectations irritating enough to curdle potions. But beneath the surface display, something else moved, an undercurrent I have not yet placed. The castle felt watchful tonight, its stones alert, its wards tightening around the foreign magic now circulating through the halls. These visitors carry enchantments of their own, subtle traces of schools shaped by different histories and different loyalties. Their presence shifts the balance of the castle's atmosphere. as if we have introduced foreign ingredients into a brew without knowing whether they will stabilize or explode. The goblet was placed in the great hall after the feast. Its flame burned with a steady blue intensity, unnervingly calm. The object radiates power, ancient and inert only on the surface. I distrust it. Artifacts of that age have long memories, and they do not bend easily to rules, even Dumbledore's. I have noticed a pattern in the air around it, faint fluctuations, like breath passing too close to a candle flame. The magic feels unsettled, anticipatory. And Potter, inevitably, was among the students lingering near it, staring with that mixture of wonder and dread he tries so poorly to disguise. He claims disinterest in attention, but he gravitates towards spectacle with uncanny regularity. Whether through intent or accident, he is always at the epicenter. It is only the 4th of October, and already I feel the year tightening around us like a snare. Something is waiting to spring. I do not yet know its form, but I can sense its shadow. October 30th, 1994. The Great Hall erupted tonight, and for once the uproar was not the students' fault, at least not directly. The goblet has spoken, and what it said was impossible. Potter's name, ejected from ancient fire as if he were a contestant. No, a pawn, chosen by forces he barely comprehends. The moment that scrap of parchment curled upward in the flame-tinted air, a silence fell so heavy it pressed against the skin. Hundreds of eyes shifted toward the boy, wide and disbelieving. Mine narrowed. He looked stunned, of course, mouth slightly parted, a picture of innocent bewilderment. He wears that expression with suspicious ease. Whether it is instinct or manipulation, I cannot yet determine. I felt a cold shock carve itself through me. Not surprised, Potter has a talent for entangling himself in chaos, but something sharper, deeper, a recognition of patterns I would prefer to forget, the echoes of a past where another child was thrust into danger by machinations beyond their understanding. I refused to linger on that thought. Memory is a venom that must be handled sparingly. Dumbledore's reaction was troubling. Surprise flickered across his features, quickly masked by that infuriating composure he wields like armor. But his eyes, those blue, assessing eyes, flashed with calculation, as though this development completed rather than disrupted some private equation. I dislike that expression. It means he suspects more than he reveals. After the hall was emptied of gawkers, the staff discussed the matter in strained voices. Karkaroff fumed with theatrical indignation, his outrage so exaggerated it bordered on comical. His concern lies not with fairness, but with his precious Durmstrang reputation. Maxim contributed her own silk-wrapped displeasure. The Ministry's representatives muttered about breaches and investigations, none of which they will conduct with competence. And Moody glowered at Potter with that manic vigilance of his, as though expecting the boy to sprout horns and confess. The man has grown more erratic since term began. His paranoia would be easier to tolerate were it not so pointed, so precisely directed. His scrutiny lingers on me in particular, a fact I do not appreciate. As for Potter, I watched him from behind my usual mask. He seemed unsettled, though not in the way one is unsettled by guilt, rather by confusion tinged with fear. A boy confronted with something he did not choose. But confusion can be feigned. Fear can be convenient. And Potter has a way of inviting catastrophe. like a lightning rod invites the storm. Still, someone placed his name into the goblet. Someone with skill enough to bypass Dumbledore's enchantments and cunning enough to hide the method. The implications are not trivial. If the dark market the cup as a message, this is its reply. The castle feels colder tonight. The torches sputter as though uneasy, shadows pooling too thickly in the corners. The flame of the goblet has gone dormant again, but its silence is not restful. It is watchful. I cannot shake the sense that Potter has been maneuvered into place, whether willingly or not. And the pattern, this terrible, familiar pattern, tightens around us all. It is only October, and already the year teeters on a precipice. November 7th, 1994. The castle has not yet recovered from Potter's unexpected elevation to champion. Though unexpected feels increasingly like the wrong word, there is a design at work to elaborate for the random mischief of students, too subtle for the ministry's usual blunderings. My classes have become testing grounds for rumor and speculation, each lesson punctuated by whispered theories and the idiotic certainty that Potter engineered the entire situation for glory. I would prefer that explanation. Idiocy, at least, is predictable. Potter, however, does not behave like someone basking in triumph. He flinches to Weasley at sudden noise, startles when his name is shouted, and avoids eye contact with the slavish admirers who once worshipped him. His nerves fray in patterns I recognize from students who cannot sleep. The boy looks over his shoulder as though expecting the castle itself to accuse him. Guilt or fear. I cannot decide which would be more inconvenient. I observed him closely in class today. His work remains mediocre, no surprise, but his hands trembled when measuring the powdered moonstone. He noticed me noticing and stiffened like a cornered animal. I felt a flicker of irritation at my own response. Concern is a luxury I cannot afford, especially not when directed toward him. Yet there it was, thin, unwelcome, quickly smothered. Moody cornered me after dinner. He made some pointed insinuation about my history and my interest in Potter's predicament. His magical eye worried like a faulty instrument. I maintained my calm, though it cost me. The man has always been suspicious, but this incarnation of him is something else, more unhinged, more invasive. He circles the great hall like a predator, but not a mindless one. There is calculation in his movements, as though he knows precisely which shadows to investigate. The first task looms. The champions have been corralled into secrecy regarding its nature, though secrecy is a fragile thing at Hogwarts. Hagrid's guilt hangs around him like steam, unmistakable to anyone with a functioning mind. Whatever creature he is tending behind those closed gates reeks of danger. And if the task is indeed what I suspect, the timing could not be worse. Dumbledore remains composed, but I have known him long enough to sense the strain beneath the surface. He asked me this morning whether I have felt anything unusual through the mark. The very question chilled me. I answered honestly. A faint pull. Nothing more. Not pain. Not yet. He nodded, as though cataloguing the information for a future he would not explain. The students have taken to watching Potter the way one observes a lit fuse. Fascinated, anxious, unable to look away. Some envy him. Others pity him. Many simply wait for spectacle. Hogwarts thrives on spectacle. Bloodlust and curiosity are close cousins in children. Tonight the wind lashes against the dungeon windows, carrying with it the scent of rain and something sharper, colder, a warning disguised as weather. Even the flame in my lantern wavers as though struggling to hold its shape. The first task is days away, and the castle feels braced for impact. Whatever was set in motion at the cup is tightening now, threading itself around Potter with deliberate precision, and I can do nothing but watch. November 21st, 1994. The first task has come and gone, leaving behind a residue of tension that clings to the castle like soot. Dragons, of course. Trust Hogwarts, in its infinite appetite for spectacle, to resurrect a creature out of legend and unleash it before a cheering audience of adolescents. The Ministry's desperation to appear competent must have reached new heights for them to sanction such idiocy. I stood on the periphery of the arena, the air thick with smoke and scorched earth, the heat crawling across my skin even from a distance. The roars reverberated through the stands, shaking the ribs of the structure and rattling the very stones beneath our feet, and Potter, inevitably, was shoved forward to face a creature that should have killed him in seconds. I told myself I was there merely to ensure the hospital wing had what it needed. Yet when the boy stepped onto the field, when the dragon's wings spread like ignited parchment and its fire arced toward him, something in my chest tightened, a brief, involuntary contraction. I shoved it down. He survived. Of course, Potter always survives. He emerged battered, breathless, but alive, the remnants of adrenaline giving him that maddening glow the students adore. They erupted into applause as though he had personally saved them from doom. Irritating, predictable, but I cannot explain how he did it. Summoning a broom under such pressure requires focus I have rarely seen from him. Recklessness, instinct, luck, or something else. Some influence moving him along a predetermined path. The boy has an uncanny ability to land precisely where danger accumulates, as if propelled by a current he himself cannot perceive. Afterward, when the chaos had died down, and the dragon handlers coaxed their charges back into containment, I found myself replaying the moment the beast's flame narrowly missed him, a margin too thin to be chance, the kind of narrow escape that does not happen twice without design. Karkaroff looked shaken. His eyes darted to me during the scoring, as if searching for confirmation of some private terror. He knows something is stirring, something neither of us can name aloud. His mark burns more often than he admits. Cowardice has become the entire architecture of his being. Moody was worse than usual today. He prowled the arena perimeter, muttering to himself, his magical eye twitching violently. At one point he looked directly at me, through me, and I felt an uncomfortable chill, as though he were peeling back layers I have kept sealed for decades. There is something wrong with him beyond paranoia, something deeply misaligned. Dumbledore naturally radiated serenity throughout the ordeal, though I caught a shadow of unease flicker across his expression when Potter mounted the broom. Only a shadow, but enough. He, too, senses the pattern tightening. Tonight, the sky is oddly clear, the air sharp and cold, the kind of brittle stillness that follows a storm that precedes another. The torches in the dungeons burn low, their flames thin and strained. I feel the mark beneath my sleeve, a faint pulse, not pain but awareness. The first task survived, the second inevitable. and the year marches forward with the certainty of a trap closing. December 6th, 1994. The castle has entered that peculiar winter fugue in which students grow restless. Lessons decay into half-attentiveness, and the entire school seems to tilt toward chaos. The first task's aftermath still radiates through the corridors. Potter's improbable survival has elevated him to a level of fame that would nauseate even the most attention-starved child. Yet the boy seems increasingly uncomfortable beneath the weight of it. His friends hover, his admirers circle, and he moves through it all with a strained stiffness that does not resemble pride. This does not fit the narrative the world insists upon him, which in turn irritates me. The boy avoids lingering in crowded spaces now. He slips into class late, leaves early, keeps his gaze fixed ahead, as though trying not to be seen. At first I dismissed it as adolescent brooding, an affliction as common as head colds this time of year. But there is something sharper threaded through his behavior, a kind of watchfulness, as if he senses a shape in the dark behind him and cannot quite turn to face it. That particular instinct is not one I can ignore. Moody continues his oppressive surveillance of everyone, though his fixation on Potter has intensified. He barked at me again yesterday, making insinuations about youthful misdeeds and old loyalties, as if I were a student caught pilfering from the potions cupboard. His behavior veers between calculated vigilance and something disconcertingly erratic. I attempted to observe him subtly during lunch, but subtlety is wasted on that blasted eye of his. It twitches, tracks, drills into stone, as if searching for concealed ghosts. I cannot tell whether he is unraveling or simply burrowing further into his own mania. Karkaroff cornered me near the stairwell to the 3rd floor, wringing his hands like a man preparing to drown. His mark troubles him. He did not have to say it. Fear radiates from him like heat from a dying fire. He attempted to draw some camaraderie from me, some acknowledgement of shared fate. I left him mid-sentence. I have no patience for his brand of desperation. If he fears the Dark Lord's return, he should. His past was never as clean as he pretends. The Yule Ball announcements have only exacerbated the general idiocy. Students swoon, stammer, and parade through the hallways, obsessed with dress robes and romantic prospects. I cannot walk 10 feet without overhearing some breathless debate about partners or the correct shade of satin. Even the staff have not escaped the contagion. Phileas was positively buoyant today, muttering about decorative charms. Hoach teased Minerva about a possible invitation. The entire castle has succumbed to frivolity. I, of course, will be expected to attend. Dumbledore insisted with that twinkling finality he employs when offering no real choice. A teacher's duty, he said, as though the thought of supervising overwrought adolescents in a dimly lit hall is something I should relish. The mere idea of enduring an evening surrounded by sentimental music and hormonal foolishness is enough to sour an entire week. Still, beneath the surface noise of festivities, I feel something else, a thrum of tension, low but growing. The wards have been restless. Twice this week I sensed pockets of magic clinging unnaturally along the stone archways near the great hall, as if the castle itself were bracing for disruption. The goblet burned too brightly during the selection. The air around the lake pulses with old enchantments. Threads are being woven, whether by intention or by consequence. Potter stands at the center of it, confused, anxious, and frustratingly oblivious, but not untouched. Winter has settled over Hogwarts in earnest, cold that seeps into the walls, into the joints, into the hours between classes. And though the students may be preoccupied with their petty concerns, I can feel it clearly now. Something is gathering, quietly, methodically, and the season has only just begun. December 19th, 1994. The Yule Ball preparations have reached a fever pitch, each corridor echoing with the rustle of dress robes, the shrill debates of indecisive partners, and the ceaseless hum of adolescent vanity. Even the portraits appear unsettled. Several have taken to fleeing their frames when particularly excitable students pass. I envy their ability to escape. This afternoon, I endured an excruciating staff meeting in which the logistical details of the ball were discussed. That is to say, Minerva presented a meticulously organized plan, while the rest of the staff contributed little beyond sighs, jokes, and unfocused enthusiasm. Dumbledore presided with benign amusement, as though the entire ordeal were a charming spectacle rather than a pedagogical nightmare. When he informed me I would be overseeing one of the corner stations to ensure the evening proceeds harmoniously, I refrained from expressing the response that rose to mind. Potter spent most of this week moving through the castle with the rigid, wide-eyed discomfort of someone who wishes he could melt into stone. His infamy as a champion has collided with the spectacular inarticulacy of 14-year-old boys. He is pursued by hopeful admirers on all sides. Watching him attempt to navigate the flock is marginally less painful than observing Longbottom handle a boiling cauldron. Both situations invariably end in embarrassment, though Potter at least manages to avoid setting anything on fire. In class today, his attention was even more fractured than usual. His ingredients were chopped unevenly, his stirring pattern erratic, his posture tense. When I approached, he stiffened, guilty, anxious, or simply overwhelmed. It is impossible to tell with him. He carries his mother's eyes, but not her clarity. Whatever disquiet he feels, he guards it clumsily, like a secret he barely understands. Karkaroff looks worse by the day. His hands shake, his voice cracks. He cornered me again, this time outside the staff room, murmuring frantic questions about whether I noticed anything, as if I would confide in him even if I had. His desperation reeked. He fears the dark marks growing restlessness. I see him press his hand to his forearm when he thinks no one watches. He is unraveling. And a man who unravels becomes dangerous in unpredictable ways. Moody prowls the corridors with increasing agitation. His magical eyes ceaselessly dart toward places no sane man would bother inspecting. Ceiling corners, flagstones, the inner joints of door hinges. Yesterday, I caught him watching the goblet's old resting place in the great hall, long after it had been removed. He muttered something under his breath when he noticed my presence, then limped off with abrupt purpose. His vigilance is no longer the disciplined paranoia of an aura. It has acquired a feverish edge, as though he is hunting a phantom only he can see. The castle itself feels taut, as though stretched thin by competing tensions. The air near the lake carries a vibration of enchantments deepening beneath the surface. The tasks, preparations leave traces I cannot identify but cannot ignore. Old magic stirs there, restless, patient, humming like a submerged chord. Meanwhile, the students dance toward their anticipated night of glittering nonsense. I will stand in the shadows, fulfilling my obligation, watching their laughter refract across the floor while the world outside tightens its noose. Winter has settled deep into the stones. The evenings stretch long and dark. I feel the season's weight in the air, dense and expectant. And though the castle prepares for celebration, something colder threads beneath it, an undercurrent that no amount of music will drown out. December 27th, 1994. The castle is finally quiet again. The frenzy of the Yule Ball has bled out of the corridors, leaving behind discarded confetti char, faint traces of perfume, and the kind of stillness that only arrives after excessive noise. Winter has deepened. Frost webs across the window panes, in patterns reminiscent of fractured runes, and the dungeons exhale a cold that settles into the joints like a warning. The ball itself was predictably intolerable. A night spent monitoring hormonal absurdity while garish music rifled through the great hall. Students glided about in elaborate robes, each believing themselves protagonists in some overwrought romantic tableau. I remained stationed, exiled, in my assigned corner, ensuring no one transfigured themselves into furniture, set fire to the drapery, or smuggled illicit potions into the punch. This year's crop displayed an unusual degree of restraint. Only 2 minor incidents required intervention, both resolved by a single glare. Potter arrived looking tense, ill at ease, his attire barely disguising the awkwardness of a boy expected to play a role he does not understand. I observed him intermittently, if only because trouble clings to him like static. He danced once, stiffly, then spent the rest of the evening orbiting the eddies of the festivities with a look of frustrated discomfort. Unlike his father, he possesses no natural instinct for such gatherings. A small mercy. There were brief moments during the evening when lantern light flickered across the enchanted snow, when the cold pressed gently through the opened doors, when my mind drifted into places it should not. Familiar shadows, half-remembered winters. I banished the thoughts quickly. Nostalgia is a corrosive indulgence. Karkaroff avoided the ball almost entirely. I glimpsed him only once, pale and darting through the entrance, like a man checking for predators. He kept a wide berth from me. That, at least, was pleasant. His fear grows so pungent it could be bottled. Moody lingered near the punch bowl for half an hour, staring into the reflective surface, as though expecting it to reveal hidden messages. Later, he prowled along the dance floor's perimeter, scrutinizing students with an intensity that made even the ghosts uneasy. The man is not himself, though with Moody, that observation feels tautological. Dumbledore maintained a composed cheer throughout the night, moving among guests with effortless grace. At one point, I noticed him gazing not at any dancer, nor at the decorations, but toward the distant doors leading to the grounds. Beyond them, the lake, and beneath it, whatever spectacle awaits in the second task. His expression tightened, so subtly I doubt anyone else saw. Something weighs on him, something he is not yet sharing. The holidays now lie ahead, a brief pause in the year's unraveling. The remaining students, those who did not flee home for Christmas, move through the halls with sluggish contentment, unaware of how precarious our momentary peace is. I feel it in the air, a thin vibration beneath the silence, like a string drawn too tight. The goblet has chosen. The tournament proceeds. And somewhere beneath the frozen lake, old enchantments are awakening. Winter lingers on the castle stones, heavy and expectant. The stillness feels less like rest and more like breath held in the dark, waiting. January 8th, 1995. The castle has surrendered fully to winter. The corridors exhale a chill that no torchlight can entirely dispel, and the stones themselves seem to groan in protest with every shifting draught. Snow presses against the windows in muted drifts, blurring the world beyond into indistinct whiteness. In this quiet, the school feels suspended, caught between terms, between tasks, between dangers not yet named. Students returned yesterday in uneven waves, carrying with them the remnants of holiday indulgence and a merciful reduction in energy. Their footsteps sounded muffled on the staircases, as though even their noise had been softened by the cold. Yet beneath this temporary calm, I sense an agitation running through them. Small, nervous glances, whispered recollections of the first task, and a growing fixation on the mysteries of the next. Potter looks worse than he did before the break, pale, distracted. A haunted quality lingers around his expression, one that does not stem from fame or the fleeting terror of dragons. He has always carried anxiety poorly, too visibly, too honestly. But this is different. He seems to be listening for something, as though the castle itself might whisper secrets into his ear. Be in class today. He nearly sliced through his own fingertip while preparing valerian stems. I confiscated his knife before he could finish, but said nothing more than the necessary reprimand. The boy flinched anyway. That reaction, raw, defensive, unguarded, sat unpleasantly in my mind long after the class dispersed. It is easier to tolerate Potter when he is arrogant, reckless, or loudly foolish. This subdued version unsettles me far more. Karkaroff has grown jumpy to an almost laughable degree. He startles at the opening of a door, flinches when spoken to unexpectedly, and watches the sky with a dread that borders on superstition. He approached me once again, hissed my name as though we were conspirators, and attempted to initiate a conversation about the state of things. I informed him, coldly, that we have nothing to discuss. His panic is a contagion I refuse to catch. The lake has taken on a strange quality. I sensed it this morning while crossing the grounds. A density in the air near its boundary, as though layers of magic were settling into place. Whatever the next task demands, the preparations have begun. Even from shore, the enchantments vibrate faintly. Old, deep magic, the kind that sleeps lightly and dreams loudly. Moody intercepted me on my way back to the castle, his magical eyes scanning the frozen trees as though expecting them to move. He accused me without words, merely through pointed insinuation, of knowing more about the Turnant's inner workings than I should. I ignored his sharp, restless scrutiny. There is something wrong in the cadence of his behavior, something discordant. It is not only paranoia, it is intent. Dumbledore remains composed, though a new layer of solemnity has crept into his demeanor. He asked me, quietly, whether my condition had changed since before the holidays. It has not. The mark tugs at the edge of awareness, faint but persistent, a reminder, not a summons. Yet the fact that Dumbledore asks at all confirms what I already know. We are approaching something. The students shiver under blankets in the common rooms. The sky hangs low over the grounds. The lake groans beneath its crust of ice. Winter has its own kind of silence, heavy, breathless, thick with waiting. And Hogwarts is waiting for the task, for the next disruption, for the dark shape approaching from beyond the horizon. January has begun with stillness. Stillness rarely lasts. January 23rd, 1995. The castle's corridors feel narrower this week, as though the very architecture has exhaled and collapsed inward. Students press closer to the walls when passing one another, their conversations clipped, their laughter brittle. The air itself behaves strangely, charged, metallic, as if saturated with spells that have not yet revealed their intent. The second task draws nearer. Its shadow stretches across the school long before its arrival. This afternoon, while crossing the courtyard, I felt a peculiar vibration beneath my feet, subtle, like the low hum of a distant engine. The lake, visible through the archway, lay black and unmoving beneath the weight of ice. Yet its surface pulsed faintly, almost imperceptibly, as if responding to an invisible tether. The enchantments preparing the site have grown dense, too dense for comfort. That magic is old, older than the tournament, older than many of the stones in this castle. It stirs memories buried in the silt. I do not like it. Potter, unsurprisingly, has not yet learned to navigate the castle without attracting attention. His classmates watch him obsessively, as if study might reveal some secret advantage he possesses. He looks thinner than before the holidays, his shoulders drawn tight as though bracing against unseen impact. Today he arrived to class late, hair damp, robes askew, distracted in a way that suggests he is chasing answers and failing to catch them. When I questioned his tardiness, he offered a mumbled apology so devoid of his usual defiance that I felt more unsettled than irritated. He avoided my eyes entirely. The boy is not sleeping. Anyone with observational competence can see it in the tremor of his hands, the dullness of his reflexes. He is drowning in something he refuses to name, and I cannot decide whether it serves him right or whether it is something far more dangerous. Moody continues to hover like a thundercloud. His magical eye spun toward me today with such suddenness that several students flinched. He prowled around my classroom doorframe, muttering something about watching movement. Movement of what he did not specify. I have no patience for riddles delivered by a man whose sanity seems to be dissolving in increments. Karkaroff, meanwhile, appears ready to bolt. The man has developed a habit of checking deserted alcoves before entering rooms, as though anticipating an ambush. His mark troubles him. It is evident in the way he tugs at his sleeve with unconscious desperation. He avoids me now, perhaps realizing that my patience for his anxiety has reached its limit. Perhaps he hopes I might reassure him. I will not. The staff table has grown quiet. Even Minerva, stalwart, rational Minerva, has been uncharacteristically pensive. Her gaze drifting toward the windows whenever Dumbledore mentions tournament arrangements. I suspect she feels the same wrongness in the air, though she would never admit it. As for Dumbledore himself, he remains an enigma, calm, watching, listening to currents invisible to the rest of us. When I asked him whether the tournament's protections were still secure, He replied only that all things move according to their own timetables. I detest when he speaks in aphorisms. It means he is withholding something. The mark beneath my sleeve has begun to prickle, nothing sharp, nothing immediate. Only a whisper of possibility, a suggestion of movement in the dark. The castle groans against the winter wind. Torches sputter. Staircases pause mid-rotation as if thinking better of where they intended to go. Something is shifting. Something deep. Something cold. And the second task is close enough that even the enchanted lake seems to be holding its breath. February 20th, 1995. The lake was restless this morning, an expanse of blackened ice groaning under the weight of its own secrets. The sound carried across the grounds like distant thunder, low and resonant, vibrating through the soles of my boots as I approached for a final inspection of the area. The task begins tomorrow. The enchantments woven into the water have thickened to the point that the air itself feels saturated. As though breathing, it draws ancient magic into the lungs. I dislike this kind of magic. It is too old, too hungry, too certain of its own precedence. The students, for their part, are gripped by a collective dread disguised as curiosity. The younger ones invent ridiculous theories in the corridors. Giant squid duels, merfolk invasions, underwater obstacle courses involving exploding kelp. The older students remain quieter, their questions edged with fear. There is something in the air that even they can feel, though they lack the vocabulary to articulate it. Potter moves through this atmosphere like a shadow. He has adopted a hurried gait, eyes down, shoulders stiff, as if he wishes to collapse his presence into the smallest space possible. His face has grown sharper, hollower. I noticed today that he nearly collided with a suit of armor while hurrying toward lunch. He did not even startle when the knight barked at him. His mind is elsewhere, buried deep in some private panic. In class, he produced a vile excuse for a shriveled fig salve, thin, watery, utterly useless. When I informed him that even Longbottom had brewed a superior mixture, he merely nodded, as though the words were coming from a great distance. The boy is fraying, whether from incompetence, fear, or knowledge he should not possess, I cannot yet determine. Moody has been circling him like a hawk. His magical eye clicks and whirs whenever Potter enters a room. Their interactions are unnerving, Moody to intent, Potter resigned. Today I caught the aura, watching the boy from behind a tapestry, his expression a grotesque blend of satisfaction and calculation. He muttered something about preparation when I approached, but the tone was wrong, off-key. Something is festering behind his vigilance. Karkaroff, by contrast, is barely functional. He intercepted me in the corridor outside the great hall, demanding to know whether the mark had changed. His desperation clung to him like smoke. I answered truthfully, no, it has not sharpened into pain, but it stirs. A pulse, a whisper, a reminder. He paled, trembling. The man is a cracked vessel. I almost pity him. Almost. Dumbledore remains an island of composed inscrutability, but even he seems more deliberate in his movements. His gaze lingers longer than usual on the frost-coated windows overlooking the lake. When I asked whether all precautions were in place, he assured me they were, but not with the infuriating calm he normally deploys. There was a strain in his voice, subtle, deliberate, like someone bracing for an undertow. Tonight the wind howls against the castle, rattling loose panes and dragging cold fingers along the stone. The torches burn too low, their flames thin and wavering. The dungeons feel colder than usual, cold with intent. The second task dawns in a few hours. The champions will descend into that dark, enchanted water, each forced to navigate a magic older than their families, older than their nations. Potter will be among them, and though I refuse to name the emotion tightening in my chest, I cannot deny that something about tomorrow feels decisive. As if the lake is not merely preparing to test the champions, but to reveal something buried beneath us all. February 25th, 1995. The lake has quieted again, though quiet feels like the wrong word. Its surface has returned to stillness, but the calm is taut, an aftermath rather than a restoration. The second task concluded 3 days ago, and yet the echoes of its magic linger in the air like a taste on the tongue. Old enchantments do not release the world lightly. I stood on the shore during the spectacle, surrounded by a cacophony of cheers, gasps, and mindless commentary. The fog hung low over the water, diffusing the winter light into something pallid and dreamlike. Beneath that surface, the champions moved through an ancient labyrinth of spells, binding oaths, barter magic, promises older than the ministry itself. The merfolk sang from the deep, their voices rising through the water like threads of silver wire. When Potter surfaced, dragging not only his intended hostage but another beside her, the crowd erupted with their usual nauseating adoration. His foolishness, his relentless, predictably reckless refusal to leave someone behind, was heralded as bravery. It was naive, it was sentimental, it was dangerous, and yet it was not without merit. I dislike acknowledging that, but the truth is what it is. The boy has a stubborn, irritating moral compass that overrides sense. It is the kind of impulse that gets wizards killed. It is also the kind of impulse that once belonged to someone else I do not care to think about. He gasped on the shore, shivering violently, eyes wide with the kind of shock no staged heroism can manufacture. For a moment, just a moment, I saw no arrogance, no performance, no inherited fame. Only a child who nearly drowned, for reasons he could not articulate even to himself. I turned away quickly. Moody watched the spectacle with an intensity bordering on possession. His magical eye tracked every movement beneath the surface, as though he could see through water, bone, and magic with equal ease. He muttered something to Dumbledore afterward, too quietly for me to hear. But the expression on the headmaster's face tightened in a way that was not relief. Karkaroff fled the moment the judging concluded, his steps uneven, his face slick with cold sweat. His mark troubles him badly. He presses his forearm every few minutes now, as if the gesture might smother the truth beneath his skin. He cornered me again later that afternoon, insisting we must speak privately. I refused. His panic is a nuisance, and I will not indulge it. The students, meanwhile, chatter endlessly about Potter's valor, filling the corridors with speculation. They do not understand the old currents that moved beneath that task. They did not feel the pressure of the magic layered there, its rules, its teeth. They saw only spectacle, not the slow tightening of something deeper. Back in my classroom, the cauldrons simmer as they always do, and yet even the dungeon air feels altered, sharper, more reactive, as though the castle's wards absorbed some of that lake-born magic and have not yet decided how to hold it. Beauxbatons Tournament marches onward, but the rhythm has shifted. The second task did more than test the champions. It stirred the waters, and what lies beneath them does not settle easily. Potter survived again. Of course he did. But each survival feels less like luck and more like design. And whatever design this is, it is tightening its grip. March 10th, 1995. A tension has settled over the castle like a film of frost. Thin, nearly invisible, but cold enough to sting when touched. The days creep forward in a sluggish grey procession. The sky a uniform pallor that leaches colour from the grounds. Even the students have grown subdued, moving through the corridors in cautious clusters, voices lowered as if to avoid disturbing something dormant. I cannot quite articulate what has changed, only that something has... Potter has become even more withdrawn, if such a thing is possible. He drifts through lessons with the hollow-eyed exhaustion of someone living on the edge of some private precipice. His robes hang more loosely on him now. His hands tremble faintly when he believes no one is watching, and he startles at the softest of noises. It is not fear of the tournament. Fear of danger produces a sharper vigilance. This is something heavier, something internal. A child carrying a burden he cannot name aloud. He produced a cauldron fume draft today that was so poorly executed it nearly dissolved the pewter. When I confronted him, expecting that familiar flair of defensiveness, he only muttered an apology. No defiance, no spark, just a dull, muted resignation. For a moment I almost felt a tug of something like pity. I extinguished it immediately. Karkaroff's deterioration is accelerating. He burst into my classroom after hours yesterday, his face white and slick with sweat, sleeve already pushed up as he shoved his forearm at me. His mark is darkening rapidly. He demanded answers as though I might provide them. I told him to leave before I lost what remained of my patience. His panic poisons the air around him. It seeps into the stones. Moody continues to stalk the halls with increasing fervor. His magical eye whirls constantly, as if trying to bore through walls, floors, students. He interrupted my class without explanation, claiming he had business with Potter, and ushered the boy outside with a look that was far too triumphant for comfort. I followed them silently, until the staircase rotated and cut off my pursuit. When Moody returned Potter to the corridor some minutes later, the boy looked pale and winded. Moody looked satisfied. The man is unraveling, or revealing. I have tried, in quiet moments, to detect the shape of what is happening beneath the surface of this year. Patterns emerge, but they refuse to align. My mark prickles intermittently, not pain, but recognition. Nights have become unsettled. I wake before dawn with the sense that something has brushed against the edge of awareness, a whisper of movement in the dark. Dumbledore remains controlled, but his calm has acquired a brittle quality I have seen only a handful of times. He asked me, during a brief conversation outside the staff room, whether I had noticed changes among the students. I told him the truth. Potter is fraying, Karkaroff is unraveling, Moody is circling, and he nodded as though these were expected developments, the logical progression of some unseen trajectory. It was an answer that resolved nothing. The third task lies months away, yet the castle already feels as though it is bracing itself, every ward and archway taut with anticipation. as though the tournament is no longer merely a competition, but a conduit, a channel through which old forces are beginning to flow. Spring should be loosening winter's grip by now, and yet the cold has deepened. The air tastes metallic. The nights grow longer instead of shorter. Even the shadows seem to stretch. Something is drawing near. I can feel it in my bones, in the mark beneath my sleeve, in the castle's uneasy breath. The year advances, and the darkness with it. March 28th, 1995. The castle has grown eerily quiet, as though smothered beneath a blanket of wool-thick tension. Even the ghosts drift more slowly through the corridors, their movements subdued, their murmurs muted. Something presses on Hogwarts, an atmospheric weight, a density of magic that feels neither benevolent nor accidental. Students whisper constantly now, not the usual frivolous gossip, but something sharper, narrower, tinged with apprehension. They speak of strange flickers in the hallways, staircases hesitating mid-rotation, suits of armor turning their heads a fraction too late. Children notice more than most adults would like to believe. They sense the castle's unease, even if they cannot name it. Potter, for his part, seems to be shrinking into himself. He moves with a distracted urgency, as though he is perpetually late for an appointment he has no memory of scheduling. His eyes remain ringed with exhaustion, his posture chronically tense. During today's lesson, he dropped a jar of asphodel roots, an unforgivable lapse of basic competence. The glass shattered with a brittle crack that echoed far too loudly in the dungeon. Potter froze, staring at the fragments as though they might rearrange themselves into an answer he desperately needs. When I assigned him the appropriate reprimand and deducted points, he merely nodded. No argument, no indignation. He gathered the shards with a kind of defeated precision that felt strangely disproportionate to the task. Something presses on him as surely as it presses on the castle. Moody's behavior has escalated from erratic to invasive. He prowls the corridors as though hunting prey, muttering under his breath about patterns and movements. Today he stopped me outside the potions classroom, his magical eye fixed somewhere behind my shoulder, and accused me, thinly, implicitly, of testing boundaries. The man is approaching a kind of manic friction, a restless vigilance that feels less like protection and more like obsession. I do not know what he is searching for, but I strongly suspect he believes he has already found it. Karkaroff is unraveling entirely. He burst into the staff room during lunch, wild-eyed and shaking, babbling about his mark and impending doom. Minerva froze mid-sentence. Flitwick dropped his spoon. Dumbledore gently ushered him out, speaking in low, steady tones. But the damage was done. The entire room had seen the state he was in. Panic radiated from him in suffocating waves. I could feel his fear clinging to the walls long after he had fled. My own mark has begun to prickle more frequently now. Not pain, nothing so overt, but a steady pulse of awareness, as though a distant drumbeat has started to stir. I find myself touching the sleeve of my robes without meaning to, reminded of promises made long ago and the precarious arithmetic of loyalty that governs my every breath. This evening, as I walked the corridor leading to the great hall, the torches guttered simultaneously, dipping the hallway into a sudden gloom. The shadows shivered on the stones, stretching themselves unnaturally thin before snapping back into shape. A trick of the light, perhaps, or a warning. Dumbledore has grown more withdrawn. His eyes track the movement of the students with a weight I rarely see, an almost paternal sorrow threaded with calculation. When I spoke with him briefly after dinner, he asked a peculiar question, whether I had noticed any shifts in the temperament of the castle's magic. He did not elaborate. He did not have to. We both sense the change. The third task may still be weeks away, but something else moves beneath its shadow. Something larger than the tournament, larger than Hogwarts. A convergence, slow but inexorable. The winds outside carry a strange pressure tonight, a heaviness that settles at the base of the spine. The castle feels poised, braced, as though listening for something it has long feared to hear. The year has begun to tilt, and I do not like the angle. April 12th, 1995. A peculiar disquiet has crept into the castle's bones. It does not announce itself loudly. No shattered glass, no screaming wards, but rather through subtle distortions in the familiar. The air feels thicker in the evenings. The staircases rotate half a beat too late, and doorways seem to hesitate before opening. Even the portraits complain of fitful sleep, their inhabitants claiming the castle is restless. They are not wrong. The students sense it, though they believe it to be little more than tenement anxiety. Their behavior has shifted. They speak in hushed tones, linger near windows, and flinch when shadows move too quickly. Even the Weasley twins, normally immune to the subtleties of atmosphere, have grown noticeably subdued. When tricksters grow quiet, one should pay attention. Potter has reached a new stage of wariness. He carries it visibly now, like an ill-fitting cloak, dragging at his shoulders. Today in class, he forgot to add saprophyris bean extract entirely, a catastrophic omission for the infusion he was brewing, when the mixture curdled into a grey, lumpy failure. He stared at it with an expression of hollow confusion, as though he could not comprehend how it had betrayed him. I assigned attention, though I doubt he absorbed the words. The boy moves as though half his mind is elsewhere, tethered to some source of strain he cannot sever. P is being maneuvered. That much is obvious, but by whom, and toward what end, remains maddeningly obscure. Every time I try to trace the threads, they vanish into fog. Moody intercepts him constantly now, dragging him into corners, speaking in low, urgent tones. His magical eye tracks Potter even through walls, twitching with predatory fascination. I caught him looming near the stone gargoyle leading to Dumbledore's office today, muttering to himself, his fingers drumming restlessly against the wood of his staff. His vigilance is not protective. It is proprietorial. Dumbledore seems to have noticed the same thing, though he has not mentioned Moody by name. During a brief conversation in the staff room, he asked whether I had observed any unusual interactions involving Potter. The question was delivered lightly, but the weight beneath it was unmistakable. I told him Moody's behavior bordered on fixation. Dumbledore's expression tightened, subtly, but undeniably. Karkaroff's deterioration continues unabated. He lurks where he thinks no one will find him. Stairwell alcoves, abandoned classrooms, the dark edges of the courtyard, pressing his hand to his forearm with a regularity bordering on compulsion. His mark is darkening quickly now. He cornered me yet again this afternoon, his voice a frantic whisper, demanding to know whether I felt it too. I walked past him without a word. The truth, of course, is that I do feel it. A slow tightening, a gathering of some distant force. My own mark stirs more frequently, pricking with an awareness that has begun to intrude upon sleep. I wake before dawn, pulse quickened, the air around me unsettled, a call not yet spoken, but forming. Tonight, as I returned to my quarters, a strange flicker rippled through the corridor, the torches dimming for the briefest instant before flaring back to life. The shadows beneath them quivered unnaturally, stretching as though resisting their own boundaries. The sensation lasted only a moment, but it left me with a faint chill at the base of the spine. Something protches, something the castle feels, even if we cannot yet name it. The third task may be weeks away, but its gravitational pull has already begun to warp our days. The tournament is no longer a contest, it is a conduit, and the world beyond our walls has started to lean toward it, drawn by a force older and darker than tradition. The year continues, its steady descent toward the inevitable, and each day the slope grows steeper. April 24th, 1995. A strange dissonance has settled over the castle these past days, a vibration just beneath the surface of things, as though Hogwarts itself is caught between breaths. The walls seem to listen. The torches sputter at odd intervals. Even the staircases rotate with an uncharacteristic hesitation, as if reconsidering their route mid-motion. It is not overt danger, but anticipation, the kind that tightens the air before a storm breaks. Students feel it, though they lack the vocabulary to name it. Their conversations are clipped, fretful. Their eyes drift toward the grounds as though expecting some revelation to rise from the mist. Rumors multiply faster than doxy eggs. Most center around the coming third task, but some, whispered in corners, exchanged in wary glances, hint at stranger disturbances. Books falling from shelves, portraits refusing to speak, suits of armor subtly rearranged without explanation. Potter looks as if he's carrying a weight he cannot put down. His pallor has worsened, dark hollows carved beneath his eyes. He moves through the halls in sharp, distracted bursts, like a bird sensing predators in every shadow. In class today, he dropped his quill 3 times. I deducted points only once. There was no satisfaction in it. That, in itself, is unsettling. He brewed in silence, shoulders drawn tight, gaze flicking toward the doorway whenever a footstep echoed in the corridor. When I passed his workstation, he stiffened, as though expecting accusation. It is not guilt in him, not the triumphant, adolescent arrogance I have come to expect. It is something nearer to dread, a child waiting for the next blow and unsure from which direction it will come. I refuse to dwell on why that unsettles me. Karkaroff is unraveling into near incoherence. I encountered him in the courtyard just after dusk. He was pacing in frantic, agitated loops, muttering under his breath, his hand pressed white-knuckled to his forearm. He demanded again to know whether my mark had changed. I told him nothing. His fear is so pungent it thickens the air around him. I cannot tolerate proximity for long. My own mark prickles steadily now, an intermittent pulse, not pain, but unmistakable in its meaning. Something gathers. The Dark Lord is moving, if only faintly, like a creature stirring in hibernation. The pattern is too familiar, the magic too distinct. I feel it even in sleep, if one can call these hours sleep. I wake before dawn, with my breath caught in my throat and the sense of something unseen brushing the edge of perception. Moody has become more intrusive. as if reacting to the same unseen pressure. His magical eye snaps and pivots with unnatural speed, tracking movements no one else can see. He loiters near classrooms without explanation, appears abruptly behind staff members mid-conversation, and prowls the hallways with the restless energy of a man preparing for war. I caught him watching Potter again, unblinking, predatory. Whatever consumes him, it sharpens each day. As for Dumbledore, he grows solemn, not alarmed. He rarely affords himself such transparency, but quiet, focused. His gaze lingers on the grounds often, as though scrutinizing the very air for fractures. Today, during a brief exchange, he placed a hand on my shoulder with a weight that felt strangely deliberate, as though anchoring me in place. "We must be ready," he said. Ready for what? He did not specify. He never specifies. Tonight, rain lashes the windows in thin silver lines, and the castle hums beneath it with uneasy resonance. The third task lies ahead, but the tension gathering does not belong solely to the tournament. Something older, darker, threads through the days, pulling events toward a point none of us can yet see. The mark at my arm pulses once as I write this, a soft, insistent warning. The storm has not yet broken, but the air is sharp with its promise. May 5th, 1995. The grounds have transformed into a construction site of controlled menace. The hedges for the third task rise higher each day, thick, dark, bristling with enchantments that coil around them like invisible vines. Even from a distance, the maze radiates a kind of latent hostility, as though it already resents the intrusion of human footsteps. The students gossip excitedly about its size. The staff does not share their enthusiasm. I walked its perimeter at dawn, when the grounds were still and the lake lay flat as obsidian. The air around the hedges crackled faintly, reacting to my presence. I extended a hand only far enough to feel the hum of the wards, ancient, layered, woven with intent. Some were of a type I recognized, but others bore a signature I could not immediately place. Dumbledore claims the enchantments are standard for the tournament. If so, the tournament was far more unhinged in previous centuries than the archives suggest. Potter lingered near the maze earlier, staring at it with an expression I could not decipher. Not fear. He knows fear, and this was something else. Something quieter, as though he sensed his own name written somewhere in those hedgerows. When he realized I was watching, he turned away quickly, slipping back toward the castle with the brisk, defensive gait he has adopted of late. The boy is being pulled toward something, and he feels the pull even if he cannot articulate it. Pluses continue, though they feel increasingly like formalities. Students' attention is divided, fluttering between nerves and speculation. My NEWT group performed adequately, though even they are rattled. The cauldrons boiled unevenly today, reacting to the agitation in the air. Magic obeys mood more than most wizards care to admit. Karkaroff is worse. His panic has reached a fever pitch. He appeared outside the staff room this morning, looking haggard, his eyes bloodshot, his voice a trembling rasp. He asked, no, begged, for a moment of my time. I refused. He is searching for reassurance that does not exist. His mark calls to him more insistently now. He cannot endure what it signifies. Unlike him, I have long made peace with the necessity of control. Moody interrupted one of my lessons without apology. He strode in, staff thudding, eye swiveling grotesquely, muttered something about checking the perimeter, and then left as abruptly as he arrived. My classroom was silent for a full minute after his departure, the students too unnerved to breathe. His behavior is not merely eccentric. It has become invasive, unpredictable in a way that suggests something beneath his vigilance is cracking. Dumbledore, too, is shifting. He walks the corridors with greater frequency, stops mid-stride as though reconsidering decisions no one else is privy to. When I spoke with him briefly after supper, he allowed his gaze to drift toward the maze in the distance, its dark silhouette unmistakable even against the twilight. "The year grows heavier," he said, and then, as if catching himself, he gave me one of those thin, inscrutable smiles that signify nothing and everything. "The mark beneath my sleeve stirs more often now. Not the sharp burn of a summons. Thankfully not, but an awareness, a pulse, like a heartbeat matched to some distant source. When I press my palm over it, the sensation lingers, a reminder of the tether I carry. Tonight, the sky is a dull iron gray, the clouds heavy with unshed rains. The wind moves strangely, swift, then still, then swift again, as though testing the air. The torches flicker along the dungeon corridor, shadows stuttering in time with the breeze. The maze grows taller, darker, hungrier. Potter grows thinner, more haunted. Karkaroff grows frantic. Moody grows stranger. And beneath it all, the world seems to tilt ever so slightly, toward the edge of something vast and irrevocable. May 18th, 1995. The castle feels increasingly like a pressure chamber. Each corridor seems narrower than the day before, each breath tinged with something metallic and expectant. Even the portraits have fallen uncharacteristically silent, as though listening for footsteps that have not yet arrived. The third task looms, and its approach warps the air around us. The maze dominates the grounds now, towering hedges twisted into a labyrinthine mass that pulses faintly with enchantments. I passed it this morning while escorting a group of dunder-headed fourth-years to herbology, and felt the wards shiver as I drew close. The magic thrumming inside is not static. It shifts in tonal gradients, surging and withdrawing like the tide. This tournament is no longer a collection of tasks. It has become an instrument. Potter wandered near the boundary of the maze again today, his gaze fixed on the highest hedge as though listening to something I could not hear. He didn't notice me approach, which is itself unusual. His nerves are raw enough lately that even breathing too loudly behind him has elicited a flinch. Today, however, he stood utterly still, shoulders tense, jaws set with a determination that did not match his years. When he finally sensed my presence, he startled violently. I said nothing. He offered no explanation. The boy is unraveling, but not aimlessly. There is a trajectory to his distress, a direction to the force that pulls him forward. He may not understand it, but he is moving toward something, step by dreadful step. Moody's surveillance has crossed into something far darker than vigilance. He prowls with a frantic precision, singling out students, and Potter in particular, for scrutiny so intense it borders on interrogation. I found him lurking outside my classroom again, his magical eye spinning so rapidly the first years shrank away in genuine fear. When I asked, pointedly, why he seemed so enthralled by my threshold, he responded with a grin that revealed nothing except its own wrongness. The man is not simply paranoid. He's invested, fixated. His behavior lacks the cadence of investigation and instead mirrors the quiet hunger of someone awaiting confirmation. Karkaroff is a spectre haunting the edges of the school. He corners me whenever he thinks he can do so without witnesses. His sleeve already rolled back, his voice cracking as he whispers, "Has it changed? Has yours changed?" I refuse to indulge him. I refuse to dignify his cowardice. It disgusts me more with each encounter. The way he searches for solace in the wrong places. The way terror dictates every breath he takes. The moment the summons comes, he will shatter. My own mark smolders with intermittent pulses, never the searing burn of recall, but a steady reminder that the world outside these walls stirs restlessly. A drumbeat heard through stone, a pressure rising beneath the surface. I can feel it even here, in the familiar cold of the dungeons. A shift in the magical atmosphere, subtle but unmistakable. Dumbledore remains outwardly calm, though his composure is now threaded with a tautness I have rarely seen. His eyes track movements in the halls, not with curiosity, but with assessment, measuring pathways, calculating outcomes. He asked me earlier whether I had noticed any changes in Moody. I answered truthfully. He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable, then dismissed me with a gentleness that felt almost like regret. Tonight the wind scrapes against the castle walls in long, uneven strokes, as though something outside is testing their resilience. The torches flicker even without drafts, their flames bending toward the western end of the corridor, as if drawn. The maze stands waiting in the darkness, its hedges shifting subtly in the moonlight. Potter drifts closer to its orbit with every passing day. Karkaroff tries, futilely, to outrun what approaches. Moody circles like a predator who has already chosen his moment, and my mark. It stirs again as I write this, a low thrum beneath the skin. The third task is nearing, and with it the breaking point of this year's quiet, gathering dread. May 26th, 1995. Dusk. The sky has taken on a sickly bronze hue, the kind that precedes a violent storm, though no rain threatens. The grounds lie unnervingly still beneath it, every blade of grass rigid, as though the entire landscape is bracing for impact. Tonight is the third task, and the castle feels coiled, tense, listening, waiting for the moment the maze awakens fully. From my vantage on the front steps this afternoon, I watched the hedges ripple. Not sway, there was no wind, but ripple, as if something immense moved beneath their surface. The enchantments layered into the maze thrum with an intensity that suggests strain, as though they were never meant to contain this much power. Even the air around it vibrates faintly, like the low hum of a resonating wire. Potter stood at the edge of the grounds earlier, staring into that shifting green mass with an expression I could not categorize. Fear, yes, but there was something else. A resigned awareness, a knowledge that whatever awaited him inside was not simply a challenge. He understands, if only instinctively, that he is being funneled toward a moment that does not belong to the tournament alone. When I approached, he startled, then schooled his features into that brittle, adolescent defiance he believes is a shield. It is not. His eyes betrayed him, wide, dark, hollowed by sleepless nights. He is worn thin, too thin. I wanted to shake him, to demand what weight he carries that no one else sees. Instead I said nothing. Words would change nothing now. Karkaroff is in a state of near collapse. He accosted me as I crossed the courtyard, whispering frantically that it will happen tonight. His mark is darker than I have seen it in years. He reeks of panic. When I told him to compose himself or leave the grounds entirely, he seized my arm with a desperation so raw it bordered on madness. I pulled free and left him there, shaking, muttering, half-broken. He will not last much longer. Moody prowls with such ferocity that even the suits of armor shrink back as he passes. His magical eye spins with manic vigilance, tracking movements no sane observer would notice. He has been circling Potter like a vulture since dawn, positioning himself at doorways, shadows, vantage points. I watched him speak to Dumbledore in low, heated tones. The headmaster listened, but there was no assent in his posture, only concern and calculation. My own mark has been prickling since morning. Small pulses first, then sharper as the hours pass. Not a summons, but a beckoning, a reminder, a warning. I can feel the magic in the atmosphere bending towards some unseen axis, aligning with a force I had prayed would remain dormant. The sensation settles at the base of the spine like cold fingers. The staff met briefly after lunch. Minerva's mouth was set in a rigid line of disapproval, though she mostly held her tongue. Hagrid looked pale, which is notable for a man of his constitution. Flitwick muttered about excess enchantments and potential instability. Only Dumbledore remained steady, too steady. He addressed us with calm reassurance, but his eyes were sharp, distant, fixed on a point no one else could see. Now the sun sinks lower, staining the horizon with a dull, burnt color. Students cluster at windows, chattering with false excitement, oblivious to the undercurrent threading through the evening. They see a spectacle. They do not feel the pressure compressing the air, or the faint shiver that runs through the stones each time the maze shifts. The hedges cast long, jagged shadows across the grass, shadows that flicker out of rhythm with the light. The torches lining the path toward the arena flare, gutter, flare, again, as though caught in a breath that does not belong to them. Everything in me recoils at this hour. Everything in me knows something is terribly wrong. And yet the sun continues to fall, and the third task approaches with the slow inevitability of a blade being drawn. Whatever happens tonight will not remain contained within the maze. Of that much I am certain. May 26th, 1995. Past midnight. The castle is shrouded in a silence so complete it feels sentient, as though Hogwarts itself has recoiled and folded inward to protect some injured core. I have returned from the grounds, though returned implies motion I can no longer recall. The hours between dusk and this moment are a disjointed blur. Flashes of light, shouting, the metallic taste of panic suspended in the air. It feels as though the world shifted and left me standing in its aftershock. Cedric Diggory is dead. Potter returned with a corpse. There is no metaphor suitable for that truth. It sits in the mind like a stone. When the alarms sounded, screams from the stand, spells crackling unpredictably, I reached the maze's threshold before my conscious mind had caught up. The hedges shuddered violently, their magic unraveling in jagged bursts, as if repelling some unseen trauma. Then they parted, abruptly, unnaturally, and Potter appeared, dragging Diggory's limp body behind him. his own face a mask of shock so profound it bordered on dissociation. His hands shook violently as he clung to his wand. His eyes were wide and unfocused, reflecting pain and terror so raw it felt indecent to witness. He collapsed beside Diggory, gasping out words that poured forth with the logic of nightmare: a graveyard, a wand, a figure rising from smoke and bone, a green light that silenced the air, and a name I had not heard spoken truthfully in 13 years. The Dark Lord has returned. My mark burned, truly burned, the moment the boy spoke it. Not a prickle, not a whisper. A sharp, searing pull that cut through flesh and breath and thought, the unmistakable summons of a master reclaiming his followers. The castle's air felt suddenly thinner. Even the stars above the arena seemed to recoil. Karkaroff fled before the word had fully formed on Potter's tongue. He ran not with dignity, but with the stumbling desperation of prey that has long known the predator's return was inevitable. His panic was almost a relief, something external to focus on as the world reconfigured itself. Dumbledore moved immediately, his voice steady despite the tremor in the air. He seized Potter by the shoulders, spoke to him in a low, urgent tone I could not hear. The boy's breathing turned ragged, panicked, his fingers clawing at the grass as though needing the sensation of earth to anchor him. He kept repeating fragments. His back, wand, grave, killed him. Each word a blow struck against the fragile illusion of safety the world had clung to. I felt the mark flare again, pulsing in frantic rhythm to the child's words. Moody appeared then, too quickly, too hungrily, demanding Potter be taken away from the crowd. His insistence had an edge I did not trust. Dumbledore's gaze flickered, sharp and assessing. He followed, leaving the rest of us amid the confusion. The stands erupted into panic. Minerva tried to calm the students. Flitwick shouted for order. Hagrid stood frozen, eyes wet, hands trembling like felled branches. The air reeked of smoke and fear. Spells flared in erratic bursts as faculty attempted to wrest order from chaos. But none of it mattered. The tournament was over in every sense that mattered. A child lay dead. Another returned, scarred by something far older and far more lethal than the labyrinth we built. I stood motionless longer than I care to admit, the night pressing cold fingers to my skin, the mark burning beneath my sleeve, a brand reawakened. It was not fear that held me, not entirely. It was recognition, a truth finally dragging itself into the open after years spent festering in shadows. The Dark Lord has returned. The game of pretense is finished, and now the path before me narrows once more to its old, terrible shape. I must answer the summons, I must return to him, and I must do it without hesitation. For Dumbledore, for the vow I made, for the thin, fragile hope that Lily's son survives what is coming. The night feels endless. The world has shifted, and there is no turning back. May 27th, 1995. The night has not ended. It stretches on in a single, unbroken line, dark, airless, and cold as the void between stars. Hours have passed, yet dawn refuses to touch the horizon. Perhaps it senses the nature of what has transpired and chooses not to interfere. I have done what was required of me. I answered the summons. The burn of the mark intensified shortly after midnight. a steady, violent throbbing that radiated through bone and marrow. There was no mistaking its meaning, no delaying it, no pretending it was anything but what it was. A call, a demand, a reclamation. I left the castle through the eastern grounds, where the shadows lie deepest and the trees lean close enough to conceal a man slipping into darkness. The air was thick, unmoving, charged with a malignant expectation. Even the forbidden forest seemed to hold its breath as I crossed the threshold. When I reached the clearing, others were already there. Figures cloaked, hooded, shivering with anticipation and fear. Men I once knew. Men who believed me dead, or imprisoned, or loyal only in memory. Men who saw my arrival and flinched. They recognized me. They remembered what I had been. They remembered what I had done. I kept my gaze forward, my pace measured. For a moment, an unsteady, nauseating moment, I wondered whether the years of disuse had dulled my ability to mask myself. It had not. The mask was still there, cold, controlled, immaculate. And then he appeared, not through bonfire, not through ceremony, but as though stepping out from behind the veil of the night itself. Whole, risen, breathing, returned, the Dark Lord. I bowed. I felt the eyes of the others on me. Curiosity, resentment, suspicion. But I bowed. His voice was quieter than I remembered, but no less lethal. He spoke my name, slowly, deliberately, with a measured curiosity that turned my stomach to ice. I offered what I had rehearsed for years, an explanation forged of caution and necessity, polished into something convincingly loyal, neither overeager nor hesitant, a man returning to his master, a man who had bided his time, a man who had survived the fall of his world and waited for its restoration. I lied with every breath in my body. He accepted me, for now. That is all Dumbledore needs, and all I can afford. When I returned to Hogwarts, the sky was beginning to pale. The first hint of morning crept along the horizon like a reluctant witness. I felt as though I were walking underwater, every movement slow, muffled, weighted. The castle loomed ahead, ancient and solemn, its silhouettes carved sharply against the weak dawn. Dumbledore waited for me in his office. He did not speak as I entered. He looked at me fully, clearly, without flinching, and in that moment the enormity of the night settled upon me. I told him what I could. Not everything, not yet, but enough. His expression did not waver, though the lines around his eyes deepened. Exhaustion etched into the corners with quiet precision. When I finished, he placed a hand on my arm, not in comfort, but in acknowledgement. A soldier receiving orders he already knows. "You have done well," he said. I felt nothing, or perhaps too much. As I write this, the torches in my chambers sputter with a faint, strained glow. The mark still pulses faintly beneath my skin, a reminder, a warning, a tether I can never fully sever. My robes smell of earth and cold air. My hands will not warm. The war has begun again. Quietly, silently, beneath the surface of the waking world. The world believes this night was an anomaly, a tragedy, a misunderstanding. They are wrong. Everything has shifted. Everything that comes next will demand more of me than the first war ever did. And I must be ready for Dumbledore's orders. for the lies I must tell, for the man I must pretend to be, for the Dark Lord who now walks the earth once more. June 1st, 1995. Hogwarts feels hollow in the aftermath, its corridors too wide, its echoes too sharp, its silence too intelligent. Fear lingers in the stone, though students interpret it as grief. Grief is merely the surface, convenient, comprehensible. What lies beneath is far more corrosive. Cedric Diggory's death has cast a pall over the school, but it is not the death itself that unsettles me. It is the lie being constructed around it. Fudge arrived in a flurry of indignation and denial, his presence an affront to clear-thinking wizards everywhere. He moves as though panic nips at his heels, though he would prefer to call it political inconvenience. When Dumbledore attempted to speak plainly, when Potter, pale and trembling, struggled to recount the truth, Fudge recoiled as though struck, not by evidence, by responsibility. The Ministry fears the truth, not for its horror, but for its implications. If the Dark Lord has returned, their authority is a brittle facade. If the Dark Lord has returned, they have failed to contain what they never properly understood. If the Dark Lord has returned, someone must be blamed, and a child is easier to discredit than an institution. Fudge's refusal to hear Potter's account was infuriating in a way I had not anticipated. Potter, shaking, voice cracking, tried to describe the graveyard, the wand, the spell that ended Diggory's life. The boy spoke without exaggeration, only raw, untempered terror. And Fudge dismissed it with a flippant gesture, insisting the child was hysterical, confused, or influenced. It was a masterclass in cowardice. Dumbledore's anger simmered beneath his composure, not rage. He rarely affords such indulgence, but a cold, unwavering focus. He knows what must be done, and he knows the Ministry will not merely fail to help, they will actively impede. After Fudge's departure, we convened briefly in Dumbledore's office. The room felt heavier than usual, the instruments on the shelves chiming in subdued, anxious tones. The headmaster spoke in low, precise terms about the tasks ahead. There was no flourish, no philosophical framing, just the stark arithmetic of war resurfacing after 13 years of uneasy quiet. My role is clear. I am to continue the deception I began last night. I am to resume my place among the Death Eaters. I am to provide information, protection, interference, whatever is required. And I am to do so without hesitation, without error, without expectation of safety. The familiarity of it is sickening. Potter crossed my path in the corridor later, accompanied by that entourage of well-meaning but inconsequential friends. He looked hollowed, pale, bruised under the eyes, moving as though each step were caught between memory and waking. He did not speak. He barely looked up. I saw, in a fleeting moment, the shock still radiating from him like heat from a cooling cauldron. He has seen what lies behind the veil of childhood certainty. He has seen the Dark Lord in a form no one can deny, except those desperate to pretend. I offered no acknowledgement. He did not seek one. My mark pulses as I write this, slow, steady, rhythmic, not a summons, not yet, but a reminder that the paths ahead have narrowed to a single perilous thread. The Ministry chooses denial, the world chooses ignorance. Dumbledore chooses preparation, and I'd choose the burden I once laid down. only to find it waiting for me exactly where I left it. War is coming, quietly, invisibly, inevitably. June 14th, 1995. Word of Karkaroff's disappearance reached us before breakfast, carried by a jittery second ear who overheard Filch swearing at an unlocked door. The man is gone, vanished in the night like smoke fleeing an open window. His quarters lie in disarray, drawers overturned, cupboards open, travel trunk missing. A mess born not of struggle, but of frantic haste. The scent of cowardice lingers like stale air. It was inevitable. For weeks he has moved through the castle like a cornered animal, his fear so pungent it clung to the stone. His mark must have burned with the same relentless summons that has plagued mine. He could not face it. He has never faced anything. Cowards, when pressed, do not fracture, they disintegrate. The staff murmured about his absence throughout the morning, though few were surprised. Minerva pressed her lips into a thin, tight line. Hagrid muttered something about bad sorts running when things get rough. Flitwick sighed with an air of resigned disappointment, as though expecting as much. Only Dumbledore remained outwardly unshaken, though there was a brief, sorrowful stillness in his expression when he confirmed that Karkaroff had fled. We both know what awaits the man now. The Dark Lord does not forgive desertion. My own markers burned intermittently all day, never with the searing violence of a summons, but with a restless, needling agitation. A reminder that the world I re-entered is no longer dormant. I spent most of the morning in my classroom, yet, even there, amid the familiar scent of crushed herbs and simmering brews, I felt watch. Not by eyes, but by expectation. Potter crossed my path during lunch. He did not look at me, though I sensed a tremor in his posture. Exhaustion, grief, perhaps even guilt. His friends flanked him, their conversation subdued. It is unusual to see him move without attracting attention, but the school's fascination with him has darkened into something wary, uneasy. Rumors ebb through the corridors like fog, that he lied, that he's cursed, that he brought something back with him. Children craft explanations to survive what they cannot understand. He carries his burden with the gracelessness of youth, but it is a burden nonetheless, one he did not choose. I should resent him more easily than I do. Moody, or the man we still call Moody, continues his obsessive patrols, though he seems somehow diminished, less volatile, but more withdrawn. His magical eye swivels in abrupt, uneven arcs, as though struggling to anchor itself. Dumbledore watches him now, closely, with a scrutiny that makes even me uneasy. Something in Moody's presence has soured into dissonance. The castle reacts to awe of it. The staircases jerk more sharply between landings. The suits of armor whisper faint metallic clicks at odd intervals, like teeth grinding in sleep. The portraits have dimmed, their occupants slinking into the depths of their frames. Hogwarts is bracing itself, an organism tightening every sinew in anticipation. As for me, exhaustion sits beneath my ribs like a stone. The nights have grown restless. I wake with my breath caught and the mark throbbing a shade too warmly. Each beat feels like a countdown, though to what I cannot yet say. Karkaroff's flight leaves a particular aftertaste, a reminder that every man chooses his alignment when the dark returns. Some flee into the shadows, hoping they will be overlooked. Others walk directly into them. I know which is required of me, and I know the cost. June 25th, 1995. The castle empties in uneven waves, as though the students themselves are uncertain whether it is safe to leave. Trunks rattled down staircases, owls circled restlessly above the battlements, and the great hall echoes with a subdued finality that feels entirely wrong for the season. What should be a time of lightness moves instead under a heavy, invisible weight. The air smells faintly of lavender polish and fear. Fudge has left, thank Merlin, though his absence is no comfort. He departed bristling with denial, trailed by a cadre of ministry sycophants, hauling crates of confiscated evidence they will never examine. His refusal to face the truth clings to this place like mildew. The ministry's stance is now clear. Silence, discredit, and blindness, enforced with bureaucratic vigor. Dumbledore offered no farewell to the minister beyond a curt nod. It was not contempt. Dumbledore rarely wastes emotion. It was something colder, sharper, a formal severing. Earlier this morning, I met with him privately in his office. The air there felt taut, as though the instruments lining the shelves were holding their breath. Forks shifted on his perch, feathers ruffling in a low tremor of unease. Dumbledore outlined what he requires of me now. No preamble, no gentle framing. We have moved beyond the era of gentle framings. I am to return fully to my old position, embedded within the Dark Lord's ranks, trusted, consistent, unbroken. I am to gather intelligence, undermine operations, and ensure that my allegiance remains beyond question. I must be close enough to the serpent's fangs to feel the heat of its breath and not flinch. It is a death sentence for most men. For me, it is a familiar corridor I had hoped never to walk again. Dumbledore's gaze held mine with a rare directness, the unspoken truth suspended between us. If I falter, if I slip, if my mask cracks even briefly, there will be no rescue. He will not risk it, nor should he. The stakes are too high now. Potter, meanwhile, moves through the closing days like someone walking in someone else's dream. I caught sight of him in the courtyard after lunch, standing alone, staring at the patch of grass where Diggory once practiced Quidditch drills. His friends called to him. He did not hear them. The boy is not merely grieving. He is rearranging his entire understanding of the world. It is disquieting to witness. He crossed my path again in the stairwell. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes shadowed with sleeplessness. For a brief moment he looked directly at me, not with accusation, not with defiance, but with a kind of raw, wounded bewilderment. Then he lowered his gaze and moved on. I felt something unpleasant stir in my chest. I extinguished it. I cannot afford such breaches. Starve carry their own quiet burdens. Minerva has aged visibly these past weeks. Hagrid avoids the Great Hall entirely. Even Flitwick's customary brightness has dimmed. They all understand what Dumbledore has said without saying. The war is no longer a past tense. My mark has burned twice today. Short pulses, quick and insistent, like a hand tapping the inside of my skin. A reminder, a summons, waiting for its hour. The Dark Lord is gathering his forces. I will soon be among them again. Night falls later now, but the darkness feels no less complete. The students leave tomorrow. The castle will grow silent, and then I will begin the work required of me. The facade of peace has shattered. All that remains is duty. July 2nd, 1995. The castle is empty now. Its corridors hollow, its staircases slow to shift, its silence unbroken, except for the occasional groan of settling stone. Hogwarts, without students, is usually a reprieve, a momentary exhalation after a year of cacophony. This summer, the quiet feels funereal, a stillness not born of rest, but of caution. The grounds lie unnervingly calm beneath the July heat, though the sunlight seems unable to penetrate the deeper shadows pooled along the edges of the forbidden forest. Even the lake, normally restless in summer, has adopted a strange, glassy stillness. Ripples form without wind. The creatures beneath the surface seem to avoid breaking it. It is as though the school itself senses what has returned to the world. Since the student's departure, Dumbledore has been in constant motion, meeting with old allies, dispatching letters carried by exhausted owls, rearranging protections around the castle with subtle but forceful precision. His movements have none of the whimsical drift he sometimes performs to set others at ease. Now he is a man of war again, though he wears the mantle quietly. We spoke last evening for a final review of my role. His questions were surgical, sharp, deliberate, designed to ensure I remain prepared. How long I can maintain the Dark Lord's trust? Which former associates still live? Which of them might suspect? What risks are acceptable? What sacrifices inevitable? The conversation was not long. It did not need to be. We both know the terrain. We both know the cost. When I left his office, the sky was bruised purple with the onset of night. Fawkes watched me with unsettling stillness. I wondered briefly whether phoenixes can sense the nature of the burdens we carry, or whether they simply recognize patterns that repeat across centuries. My mark burned twice today, sharp, pointed bursts, gone as quickly as they came. Not summons, not yet, but signals, probes, as though the Dark Lord is testing the web of loyalty still extended across the British Isles, plucking its threads to see which vibrate, which weaken, which snap. Karkaroff's thread has snapped. Mine must not. I walked the empty dungeons this afternoon. The air was thick with heat. The stones radiated a slow, oppressive warmth that clung to the skin. Shelves of ingredients stood in perfect order, too perfect. The room felt like a sanctuary abandoned mid-incantation. I found myself checking the cauldrons, the cabinets, the storeroom, not from necessity, but from habit. Ritual movements that steadied the mind once, though now they feel like echoes from another life. Potter lingers in my thoughts more than I care to admit. Not sentiment, but inevitability. He is a fulcrum around which this war will turn, whether he understands it or not. His fragility in these past weeks was disquieting. Not because I expect strength from him. He is 14, but because it reveals the scale of what lies ahead. Children should not be tasked with such things, and yet the world has arranged itself so that he must be. The sun has nearly set. The stones along the battlements drink the last of the light. A warm wind sweeps across the grounds, but it carries no ease. Only the faint scent of summer grass, overlaid with something metallic, like distant lightning. In a few days, I will be gone from these walls, moving back into a life I abandoned years ago, donning a mask I had hoped never to wear again. I do not delude myself. The path ahead is narrow, treacherous, and without mercy. But the choices have been stripped away. Only the necessary remains. Duty, deception, vigilance, survival. The castle sleeps uneasily tonight. So do I. July 14th, 1995. The castle has settled into a profound stillness, the kind that feels less like peace and more like a breath held too long. July's sunlight spills through the windows with an almost theatrical warmth, gilding the stone in a way that should suggest repose. But Hogwarts is not resting. It is waiting. My trunk remains unpacked, though I leave before dawn. The room around me feels unfamiliar, stripped of its usual rhythm. No simmering cauldrons, no clatter of glass, no shouts drifting down from the great hall. The silence presses on the air like a weight, a final reminder of what safety feels like just before one steps beyond its boundary. Dumbledore summoned me this morning, not urgently, but with a gravity that rendered the walls of his office sharper, the air thinner. He gave no speeches nor reassurances. There is nothing left to say that has not already been carved into the marrow of our understanding. His instructions were precise. The map of my next months laid out with the ruthless clarity Lee war demands. I will return to the Dark Lord's ranks entirely. I will re-enter the circle. I will listen, observe, sabotage where I can. I will walk the knife edge of suspicion day after day, with the calm of a man who has already died once. Dumbledore trusts me. That is both a burden and a chain. When our conversation ended, he placed his hand briefly upon my shoulder, a gesture not of comfort, but of acknowledgement, a silent recognition of the sacrifices being placed upon the table. His eyes held a depth I have seen only a handful of times, a sorrow sharpened by inevitability. He cannot protect me where I am going. That much is understood. The irony is not lost on me. I spent my youth striving for significance, clawing toward a cause I believed would grant it. Now, older, I find myself returning to that same darkness, not for meaning, but for duty, for necessity, for atonement that must never be named as such. Potter has already left the castle. I watched from an upper window as he crossed the grounds toward the carriage that would take him to the trains. His posture was subdued, shoulders drawn inward, as though the weight of Diggory's death still clings to him like smoke. He glanced back at the castle only once, not in longing, in wariness. He senses what has begun. I tell myself that my concern is purely strategic. The boy's survival is essential for the war, for Dumbledore's plans, for reasons older than either of them. Yet as I watched him disappear through the gates, a chill threaded itself down my spine. Not pity, something colder. A recognition that he, too, is stepping onto his own narrow path. The staff have dispersed, each to their own summer obligations. Minerva left with a stiffness in her shoulders that betrayed her worry. Hagrid lingered on the grounds long after sunset last night. Even the portraits seem restless, their inhabitants shifting uneasily within their frames. The castle feels abandoned, but not empty. Its magic draws inward, tightens, consolidates, a fortress preparing for sea. My mark burns with a steady, rhythmic pulse, less violent than before, but insistent. It is a tether, a reminder, a claim that must be answered with perfect precision. The Dark Lord is rising rapidly. His followers gather like carrion birds, circling a fresh grave. Their enthusiasm is palpable in the air, like static. I must go to them. I must become what they expect to see. and I must not forget who I truly serve beneath that mask. Night falls slowly across the grounds. The lake glimmers with a deceptive serenity. The wind carries the faint scent of damp earth and something metallic, an omen disguised as summer air. I extinguish the last of the candles now. My departure approaches. The year has ended, but the true work has only begun. I step forward into the dark willingly, not because I am brave, but because there is no longer any other path I can walk. May the shadows take me, and may I emerge from them intact. July 27th, 1995. The days blur now, long, airless hours strung together by the dull ache of my mark and the quiet, looping thoughts that fill the spaces between obligations. I write this not from Hogwarts, but from a borrowed refuge, a waystation between identities, where the walls hold no allegiance and the air tastes of dust and disuse. It is not safe. Nowhere is. But it grants me enough stillness to think, and I find I require that more than I expected. I have met twice with the Dark Lord since my return to his circle. I have lived 100 years in the space of those two audiences. The first meeting was merely confirmation. I arrived, bowed, spoke in carefully measured tones that carried the right blend of humility and resolve, and allowed him to study me the way a serpent studies the air before striking. His acceptance was not verbal. It manifested in the subtle slackening of my mark's burn, a faint easing of pressure, as though his magic brushed against mine, testing its texture, its truth, and did not immediately reject it. That was my reprieve. Temporary, qualified. The second meeting was worse. He summoned a smaller group this time, lieutenants of the First War, men who remember power as others remember warmth. Their faces have aged poorly, lines cut by cruelty, eyes bright with fanaticism, or hollow with obedience. I stood among them and felt the past wrap itself around my throat. He questioned me directly, not about Dumbledore. He is too clever to reveal interest in him so plainly. Not about the Order. He pretends it is beneath his concern. He questioned me about loyalty. My answers were precise, deliberate, devoid of embellishment. I crafted each word with the care of a man assembling a delicate poison, effective only if perfectly measured. He watched me in silence, that terrible, lidless stillness of his, as though listening for the tremor beneath the surface of my magic. When he allowed me to step back, I felt the brush of relief like a rush of winter air. I did not let it reach my face. Somewhere at the far edge of the clearing, a man screamed, a punishment for someone else's failure, or perhaps a demonstration. The Dark Lord enjoys demonstrations. I returned to this refuge with my nerves thrumming, my thoughts jagged. It took an hour for my hands to stop shaking. The wizarding world moves on blindly, refusing to admit that the ground beneath it has shifted. Fudge parades about the ministry in performative confidence, commissioning reports designed to prove Voldemort does not exist. The public chooses comforting lies over the unbearable truth. It is astonishing how willingly people surrender clarity for peace. Potter is slightly at the burrow by now. I imagine the Weasleys fuss over him, mistaking exhaustion for mere sadness, unaware of the nightmare that follows him into sleep. He will not speak of what he saw. The first terror is always too large to articulate. Dumbledore has written me twice, short messages sparse, coded. The ink trembles with urgency beneath its restraint. He is rebuilding the order, quietly, deliberately, like a man arranging pieces on a chessboard whose opponent has begun moving without warning. And I must re-inhabit the shape of the monster I once escaped. I must mold myself to their expectations, submit to their rituals, and bury the part of me that recoils. It is an act of obliteration, performed with meticulous intent. Night has settled outside, warm and close. The room smells of damp wood and stale air. My wand lies on the table beside this journal, though I feel strangely reluctant to touch it. My magic coils tightly beneath the skin, restless and taut, as though anticipating the next summons. There will be one soon. I feel it in the mark, in the silence that surrounds me, in the queasy, expanding sense that this is merely the prologue to a far darker year. The world has turned its face away from the truth, but I walk toward it because I must, because Dumbledore depends on it, because the boy depends on it, because there is no one else left to walk this particular road, and because once one has entered the darkness, there is only one direction left, forward.